Welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council with hosts Grace Evans and Moses Brattrud. Stay informed on the top stories on life, family, and religious freedom. Get the facts, stand for truth.
Hello and welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. I'm Moses Brattrud.
And I'm Grace Evans.
And we're here to bring you the top stories of the week so that you can get the facts and stand for truth. So this week, Grace, we're talking about crime spike in the Twin Cities. Minneapolis questioning whether they should abolish their police department. Our Senator Tina Smith going radical on a couple issues. We're going to be rebutting a viral TikTok that's going around. That's going to be fun.
I'm so excited to talk about that.
Yeah, Grace is rubbing her hands in glee. Literally, if you're watching video, and then and that's gonna take us out for this week. So we got a lot to talk about. I want to talk first about something that happened just a mile from my house.
Oh wow, that close?
Yes.
Okay.
Early Sunday morning, at the I think it's called the Truck Park, which is sounds like a RV facility or something, okay. But it's a bar. It's a bar in a fancy schmancy little area of St. Paul, the West 7th Street area, near the Xcel Energy Center where the Minnesota Wild play. And there was, at around 2 a.m., there was an altercation that broke out, and 15 people were shot, and one person tragically died. And the suspects are in custody. But to my knowledge, this is the most gunshot victims from any one incident in the whole Twin Cities since this crime wave started. I haven't heard of any larger incident, and that really it's really interesting to see. Like when something like this happens, it's really informative to look at who's being quiet and who's making waves. So. When you have an incident like this, anybody who has an agenda that supports the police, they're going to say this is why the police need more resources,
right? Because
they need to be able to stop crime before it starts through deterrence. It turned out that I think there were 2 suspects who have been charged with these horrible crimes. And neither of them were eligible to actually carry weapons. So they were illegally carrying weapons. Now, that's the sort of thing that could have been discovered earlier through proactive police action, like maybe even a traffic stop. Now, that's a controversial thing to stop someone because they have a broken taillight and then use that as a pretext for searching their car. That's a whole issue as to whether that infringes on people's civil rights.
I just think that there should be more restrictions and more background checks necessary if you're going to have a gun. And obviously these people probably acquired them illegally, but...
So these guys had guns illegally. So police action, I think it's pretty non-controversial to say that the police could have kept these guys off the streets if they had the resources to do it. So you have even Democrats like Governor Walz, Senator Amy Klobuchar saying this is horrible that this has happened. The mayor of St. Paul, Mayor Carter, they're saying we need to do stuff to prevent this from happening, including giving the police more resources. So there are, on the other hand, right across the river in Minneapolis, instead of talking about giving the police more resources, they're talking about an amendment to the city's charter, and as many of you know, because it's made national news, an amendment to the city's charter that would abolish the police department altogether. So there's been a lot of spin about that.
Yeah, so much.
And so they're like, oh, it won't actually abolish the police. Oh, it's going to make the city so much safer.
And I live in Minneapolis, you guys, and once Moses has finished giving some background, I just want to talk about a few things I've experienced living in the city how unsafe it really is.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about that in a schadenfreude sort of way. So this is the question. I just want to give you the facts. This is the question that Minneapolis residents are going to have on their ballot in early November. Shall the Minneapolis City Charter be amended to remove the police department, and replace it with a Department of Public Safety that employs a comprehensive public health approach to the delivery of functions by the Department of Public Safety, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So, public health approach. Can we break that down a little bit? Like, what does that exactly entail?
Yes. So a big talking point from people who want to abolish or defund or change the way that that law enforcement works is that a lot of times what you have is I don't know how often this actually happens, but you have someone who is mentally ill, who is having a psychiatric episode, and who is threatening to harm themselves or others. And then when people realistically are going to call 911 in a situation like that, and police are going to respond
with force.
And they if a gun is pointed at them, they have, of course, the right to defend themselves. That is integral to how police work. If they don't have to wait to be shot at to use deadly force. If deadly force is if someone is pointing a knife or a gun at them.
So these people that are advocating to defund the police because of scenarios like that, wouldn't they? I was hearing about this summer of George Floyd and everything happening. A lot of people were pushing this narrative. They wanted professionally trained experts, health experts, mental health experts to go in, rush in on the scene, rather than an armed police force to try to reason with the person, to try to talk with them, which... Interesting idea, but honestly, like if someone is being raped or there's someone in your house with a gun that could shoot you and your family, do you want medical experts, health experts, mental health experts to be rushing in that are unarmed? You definitely don't want that. You definitely want the police with a gun, because if your wife is being raped, a mental health therapist is not going to help. You're going to need some force there.
Yeah.
So that
absolutely.
Is that kind of where you were going with that too?
Well, absolutely. Like the moderates on this issue, quote unquote, say that we need to abolish the police department, create this new Department of Public Safety. And I want to just one more line from this lengthy question on the ballot, and it will say the Department of Public Safety, which could include licensed peace officers, in parentheses police officers, if necessary.
If necessary.
So they're not even committing themselves to even having any type of future police department. Now, no city in the United States has actually gotten rid of armed police officers. There are other cities that have done reform efforts. Camden, New Jersey is one of them. And so, but what Grace is saying is really important. There are situations where you may have someone who's having a psychiatric episode and they need compassion and they need care, but they also need to be kept from harming themselves and others. And deadly force is one way to do that. And it's not like police are a blunt instrument. Police are trained at de-escalation. They are trained to make a dangerous situation safer, both for someone who's having an episode and for anyone who is in the vicinity who might be harmed. They're trained to make an area safe.
Right. And I will say that I am all for police reform, using that word in a specific way, in that I want it to be easier for us to fire bad police. If there are police that are not doing their job well, if they're not serving justice and promoting good and protecting against evil, we need to have easy avenues in which we can fire them, because you know that Moses and I are not a fan of unions. We're not a fan of teacher unions. We're not a fan of police unions. Unions make it very hard to fire bad cops. And Moses and I will be the first to admit that there are sinful people in every vocation. There are sinful teachers, there are sinful police officers, there are sinful pastors, there are sinful people in every vocation. And we do need to do our best to make sure the police force is full of people who will uphold the common good and fight for the rights of citizens and the lives of citizens. And the majority of them do, and I'm so grateful for what they do. But we would be amiss if we didn't state that fact, the obvious, that there, of course, are sinful. Everyone is sinful and fallen, and therefore there are some wicked cops. Not the majority, but we definitely support policies that have more comprehensive training and just make it easier to fire cops that are acting wrongly.
I completely agree with that. Now, people can disagree with us in good faith. Obviously, officers need to know that the department has their back in a situation where they've been accused of something that they didn't commit. But I absolutely agree that, you know, when you have bad cops, and they'll, you know, people on the left will be like, it's not just a few bad apples, it's systemic.
Right, that's what they'll say.
Yeah, and I don't really believe that. I want to be candid. Like, I've heard some real nasty stuff about different police departments. I've heard that there's gangs operating within the Los Angeles Police Department, for example. Okay. Yeah, and that's pretty well documented, actually.
Huh.
And
that's the sort of thing where if you don't have police unions, it becomes so much easier to fire them. And yeah, obviously Moses and I don't support cops that are doing their job poorly.
No. So I kind of think like, yeah, well, I'm going to say something controversial here. I think that the Minneapolis Police Department probably does need some measure of reform.
I do agree with that. I don't agree with it with how the left is using it, with how progressives are using it, but I do agree that there does need to be some reform.
Yeah, so I just, like, I live in St. Paul, and I look at the contrast just between two similarly sized cities just right across the river from each other. St. Paul's Police Department is underfunded. Their officers are short-staffed. They're fighting with the city council and mayor to get more funding, more officers, just as they are in Minneapolis. But the amount of misconduct by St. Paul police officers is, as far as I can tell, much lower. The respect that people in St. Paul have for Police Chief Todd Axtell, and especially for Ramsey County Sheriff Bob Fletcher, who does a really great live on patrol thing where you can just go live stream and watch him patrolling the neighborhood. It's so fun to watch. In fact, just a few days before the shooting, this is kind of eerie. He's been a cop for 40 years almost, and he and his partner were driving past this bar where this took place. I think this was on Friday night, and they were driving past on Friday night, and he said, we've never had a shots fired call here, and I hope we never do, but with this amount of people crowding into this space at late hours of the night, mixing of alcohol, it can't be too long before we do. And just 2 nights later, they did get that call. Wow. And it's horrifying. And the point there is that police know the trouble spots. They know what they need to do, and they just don't have the resources to respond to the crazy crime wave we're experiencing.
And I will say, like, you can't solve everything by throwing money at it, of course, and Moses and I aren't saying that. Like, obviously, funding is necessary, but also reform institutionally and with the checks and balances there. We definitely support both of those things. But definitely, since George Floyd and everything in Minneapolis and his tragic death, there have been so many less police. The police presence has drastically decreased.
Minneapolis has gone from 800 cops on their payroll to less than 500.
It's insane. And
in a city of 400,000 people.
And the main reason for that, if I'm not mistaken, Moses, you can correct me, is because a lot of them quit their jobs after they saw what happened to so many police officers. Even the police officers that were involved in the Breonna Taylor incident, which again is tragic, a lot of them, after seeing what happened in Minneapolis, a lot of them decided to quit their jobs because of the blatant disrespect towards police officers by mainstream media and by a lot of progressives. So many people are unthankful for the service, for the police officers that serve our country, and they were like, okay, well, we're going to have to leave because it's just unsafe. So many police officers were assaulted during those days, during the last year, still are, just because of this outrage at police officers as a whole for the crimes and the heinous actions of a few, which is a fallacy, right? You can't just say this is true of one person, now it's true of the whole. Right. So yeah, the police presence has drastically decreased, and I can talk about the implications of that too a little bit later in the episode. Yeah,
so absolutely, and I think like we're talking about a complicated issue. Like how do you support the police while dealing with bad cops, while doing systemic reform if it needs to be done, while maintaining the most important thing, which is that people are able to live free from fear of violence and criminal acts. And the fact is that in the Twin Cities as a whole, people are not free from that fear right now. In St. Paul, homicides this year are about to surge past the rate that they've had in the last 30 years. So in my lifetime, there will have not been homicides in St. Paul as high as they have been. In Minneapolis, which was once dubbed Murderapolis because of its insane murder rate. Yeah, by the New York Times.
How recent was that?
That was in 1995.
Okay.
And that was Minneapolis is about to blow past that number.
Oh, definitely.
In terms of the number of murders, it was 34 homicides. No, it's much more than that. What am I talking about? I don't have the homicide numbers in front of me, but the point is, public safety is literally so much more important than most other issues that city governments deal with, and do not. It's just an issue where you have to tread so carefully. Like you cannot abolish the police department because you think the police department is so broken that it needs to be completely abolished and redone. Because if you do that during a crime wave, then you are going to make the most vulnerable people in your community. And that generally means people who live in the poorer neighborhoods who tend to be black and brown.
Yep.
Those are the people who suffer the most from a crime wave. And so in turn, those are the people who suffer the most when you try to abolish the police.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that transitions great into my point, because that's exactly what I was going to say. Because if we do abolish the police, which I do not think it will happen, I think most of Minneapolis sees the truth that we need our police, even if we do need reform. You're just going to see you're going to see the rich people be able to hire private security guards, and just you're going to see them do that. And then all of the minority neighborhoods are going to severely suffer from crime, because that's where we need the most cops. And speaking from personal experience, even, I live in Phillips neighborhood in Minneapolis, which is very unsafe. Mm-hmm. And Minneapolis also is one of the most diverse cities in America, actually. There's so many immigrants. There's so many different ethnicities, even different religions in Minneapolis. So we have lots of minorities, and I live in a neighborhood full of minorities, mostly Muslim, but lots of different minorities. And it's a very unsafe neighborhood. Just last night, actually, one of my friends was overstudying with one of my roommates, and they both came running into my room, and they were like, Grace, this was at like 9:30. They were like, we just called the police. And I was like, okay, why'd you call the police? And they heard breaking glass right outside our house, and they thought it was like in a car right by our house. And so they called the police because my friend had to leave to go home because she doesn't live there, and she felt unsafe walking outside. So she called the police. She reported the incident. She was like, we don't know exactly what happened, but we heard this. We feel unsafe even leaving the house. So the police responded, and they were willing to actually come walk her to her car, which is a huge blessing. Mm-hmm. But they were scared, and that's not even the worst of it. I mean, when I moved in August, the second night I was there were gunshots right outside my house that night, and 2 cars were shot up. Their windows shot up, and their sides shot up. This was about like 50 feet from my bedroom, too, because there's a big apartment complex right next to my house. And
that is insane.
Yeah, last year I was living in the same location. Well, first of all the time when I walked on the street, there's just needles lying on the side of the street. But last year...
By needles, you mean... like needles used to inject heroin?
Right, okay. Right, yeah. But last year, someone tragically OD'd right outside my house on the side of the street. Gosh. Lots of cop cars there. And just this week, a different day, there were like 3 cop cars just parked right in front of my house. I don't know why, but they were there for a few hours. It's just, the crime rates are crazy. One of my friends from school and his girlfriend were held at gunpoint just a few weeks ago, and their cash was taken from them, their wallet was taken, their phones were taken. Oh my gosh. This was in broad daylight. This was a few blocks away from me. So those are just a few examples of that's where I live, in a minority community in Minneapolis. And if Minneapolis does decide to defund the police, I can guarantee I will not be living in Minneapolis. Yes, my school is there. I will commute 40 minutes. I will live in the suburbs. I will not be living in Minneapolis because I would feel extremely unsafe if that were the case. And
you're not the only one who feels that way, Grace. Absolutely not.
Most people that have families especially do not want their kids growing up with high crime rates and no supervision and no people to call for safety. Even though police presence has drastically decreased, I'm still so grateful that I can call 911 and there will be a police officer coming to help me within the next few minutes if I need it. And I can't imagine not having that avenue.
It absolutely boggles my mind. Like, it's so sad. Minneapolis is a great city in so many ways, but if they do this, if they vote to abolish the police, the eyes of the nation will be upon them. Right. And it's not like the gangs who create most of the violent criminal activity in Minneapolis, St. Paul, most other cities. It's not like they're going to just put down their guns when the police are abolished. And like and that's why actually as we close our discussion of this topic, that's why we've seen so much flip-flopping from members of the Minneapolis City Council and Mayor Fry to a certain extent, who seems to be universally hated. Nobody likes him at this late stage in his. Well, I mean, who knows? He might win re-election because he's more pro-police than the other wingnuts on the ballot. So earlier this, so I'm going to read a little bit from a news article. Earlier this year, Minneapolis City Council members Felipe Cunningham and Steve Fletcher joined 7 of their colleagues at a rally which pledged to dismantle and defund the city's police department. All that money that has gone into the police department, and what have we gotten in return? Cunningham was questioned at a rally. Pain, trauma, and hurt. Months later, oh shoot, this is the article's cutting me off of the paywall. But the upshot is that months later, those city council members both oppose this ballot question to defund the police. And why? Because they've been told by their constituencies that the crime wave is nuts and they need to do something about it. And you know what? Police are part of the solution. Police, not everybody likes the police. That's fine. You don't have to like the police. But do you want there to be do you want to be safe walking to your car at night?
I definitely would like to be. And I want to talk about something, too, before we close this section.
Yeah.
Just about this whole narrative and idea that progressives are pushing of deconstructionism, because they're pushing it in so many ways. I mean, they're pushing it with this. They think that we need to deconstruct the entire police force because of a few bad cops. And on the other hand, they argue that we should deconstruct all of America because there are some problems with America. They're saying it's systemically racist, it's systemically terrible, systemically evil, and therefore we need to abolish all of America's systems because they're all inherently contributing to these evil things. And as Christians, we need to evaluate this. I mean, deconstructionism also plays into critical race theory and deconstructing race and religion. And whenever a Christian starts deconstructing reality, especially deconstructing their religion, we need to see that as a red flag, and we need to ask. We can even do a whole episode on this, actually, because I feel like there's so much we really could talk about here. But just wanted to add that in there, that when you start deconstructing things, usually problems arise, especially if you're a Christian.
I like that, and I think, I like the big picture, Grace, that you just drew for us, and I think it's absolutely true. Like, I think a lot of people feel that society is kind of collapsing around us. I hope to God in heaven that that's not true. We certainly live in a time of instability in a way that our parents probably did not. Maybe the 60s was a comparable period of social unrest and so forth. And so this isn't unprecedented in American history, but it's bad. And the sad thing is to see, as you say, progressives voting to deconstruct or destroy or abolish, whatever word you choose, different institutions like the police department or things like traditional families. I mean, and because So the idea is, the traditional family, the idea of that being the norm, the idea of it being a norm for a man and a woman to get married and have children, for that to be the normal family structure, that is exclusionary, that makes you hurt and makes you feel less than if you don't have that perfect family structure, if you grew up like I did in a single with a single mom. And by the same token, people say, the police. Well, there's police who. I mean, I've watched videos of Baltimore police literally planting drugs on somebody.
I know.
And so there are bad cops out there. Yeah. And so is the solution a revolutionary solution where you completely break our existing institutions and try to create something new? But Or is it an evolutionary solution where you just try to slowly and incrementally make things better for people?
Right. And that's the thing, though, is when people talk about completely doing away with America and abolishing all of our systems, people that do that, I feel, tend to lack so much gratitude for America and just gratitude for the things that we have accomplished and the good things that we do fight for. Because America is seen as generally the greatest nation in the world by most nations. We receive the most immigrants every single year because the most people are fleeing to our borders, because America is seen as a land of opportunity and land of prosperity. And America is, Ali Stuckey has said this before, America is a good tree. We should not cut down that good tree. There has been some bad fruit. We need to eliminate that. We need to fight that. but we can't cut down the tree of liberty. America has accomplished so much. We are founded on such great ideals. The ideals that every single person is endowed with inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that we need to protect those ideals. And that's what makes America so great. We know we have our flaws. I mean, look at abortion. Abortion is rampant, and it is the greatest atrocity of my generation. It's absolutely terrible. It's a Holocaust. We need to fight against that. But there are so many great things about America, like our freedom to say what we believe. Right. Even that, we can compare that to China and North Korea and freedom of speech. Moses and I have this opportunity to be here on this podcast today and talk about what we think on issues. And in our country, you literally can burn the American flag and not go to jail, right. Which obviously the fact that you can do that shows how privileged you are to live in America. I talk about that a lot on my Instagram, actually, because people will post pictures of burning the American flag, and it's just ridiculous. It's like, well, if you can burn the American flag, you don't realize how blessed you are to live in a country where that's even a possibility, where you don't get in trouble.
Yeah,
and so
a lot of countries where doing something like that will get you shot.
Yes, actually, though. So there's so many good things about America, and we can't not be grateful for those things, but we also do need to recognize where progress is, where we need to progress, because there are a lot of things. There's human trafficking, there's abortion, there's a crisis at the border. There are things that we need to reform for sure, and the police force is one of them.
Absolutely. So the question, everything you said just now was fire, Grace.
Thanks.
But the question is, do we want to kill everything, cut down the tree, at the analogy you were using, or do we want to give the tree better fertilizer, prune the tree, so that the tree grows in a more healthy way? And I think one example, transitioning now, of people who want to cut down the tree would be our Senator, Tina Smith. So Senator Tina Smith, unlike many of her colleagues, is not a career politician. She was a career bureaucrat. She was she was Governor Dayton's lieutenant governor here in Minnesota, and then she was appointed to fill a vacant Senate seat by Governor Dayton. She then won an election in her own right last fall. So now that she's in her seat, and she's been kind of quiet. People have noticed that she's been kind of quiet on various issues, especially compared to Senator Klobuchar, who ran for president and who is more or less a moderate Democrat. But Senator Tina Smith is not cut from the same cloth. One thing you need to know about Senator Tina Smith is that she was a high official in Planned Parenthood. She worked for Planned Parenthood for years. And she is a radical abortion advocate. Yes, I was searching for a word and I couldn't find any that weren't impolite. So
supporter.
Yeah, she's a radical supporter of abortion, and abortion paid her salary for many years.
Yep.
And who knows what? I don't know whether she continues to receive political contributions from Planned Parenthood. I believe she does.
I bet she does. Yeah.
We'll check on that for you. So Senator Tina Smith, when she was running for re-election last year, she refused to say whether she would support packing the court, whether she would support raising the amount of Supreme Court justices at the United States level so that there would be more Democrats on the court.
And why don't we just pause and talk about really quickly why that would be problematic, why packing the court is problematic, and even what that is, because I don't know if our entire audience knows what that is.
Yeah.
So packing the court for our audience is when you add more Supreme Court justices to the Supreme Court. And the problem with that idea is if the government in power, the party in power decides to pack the court, of course they're going to pack it with their party. So if Democrats are in power, then they're going to pack the court with Democrats. And if Republicans are going to be in power, they're going to pack the courts with Republicans. But the problem with that is then it's just going to completely flip-flop every single time you have a different party in power, and then there's really never going to be justice because you're constantly going to be pushing the people into power that you want to be in power. So it really it would do away with with our system, and with being able to trust our system.
We have independent. I'm forgetting the phrase. What do we call it? That the branches of government are independent from each other.
Checks and balances? Is that
something along those lines. Yeah. This is really embarrassing. The idea that the president is not in charge of the Supreme Court.
Right.
The Supreme Court is not in charge of the president, and neither of them are in charge of Congress. We have three equal, on paper, branches of government, And so this would be blatant political interference in the Supreme Court. Now, of course, the progressives will say, well, look what Donald Trump did. He and Senator McConnell, they barged these nominees, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. They barged them through the Senate with little respect for precedent, and they did it in an election year, which is what they said they wouldn't do before. Yes. There's always politicking. Both parties have engaged in politics to get their judges on the Supreme Court that they wanted. Now, the last time that court packing was seriously tried was by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he, FDR wanted to, the court kept striking down his New Deal policies, and he wanted them to stop doing that, so he was going to try to add more justices to the court. And in that time as well, it was just seen as a naked political ploy. So anyway, Tina Smith said she wouldn't say anything about this when she was running for re-election. Very smart move. But now that she has been re-elected, she fast forward 12 months, the Minnesota Democrat is the first person in the U.S. Senate to co-sponsor a bill to do just that. So
I want to read a quote from her. She said, "The Texas case was really the final straw for me."
Right.
That's the reason that she's coming out in support of packing the court. So
that's how dear abortion is to her heart. That the Texas's common sense restrictions on abortion, no abortions after the heartbeat can be detected, that makes Senator Tina Smith so angry that she has to do something which would do a lot to undermine our democracy. Packing the Supreme Court. Now I just want people to watch Senator Tina Smith, because we're going to see more radicalism from her. She is not a moderate. She has a very little interest in appealing to your sort of mainstream Minnesota voter, and a lot of interest in catering to the left wing progressives who did help her get into the position of power that she's in today. Now,
her ultimate allegiance is to child sacrifice and to abortion.
Yeah, she like this quote is just showing she's part of the abortion lobby, and that's a bad thing to be. But I want to move on from that. I want to talk about this TikTok, and we're gonna play this for you. If you're watching, you'll see this on screen.
Yeah,
if you're at home, if you're listening, you'll hear the audio.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and just roll the clip right now.
Some folks believe a life begins when egg meets sperm and wanna force all pregnant women to carry to term. But their actions point to something that you wouldn't expect, that they think kids only matter when they're not born yet. They'll make sure family leave and childcare funding fails, take away their parents at the border and jail. Kids beg for climate action under crippling debt, while you show them they only matter when they're not born yet. If abortion was the issue, contraception would reduce it. Oh, but wouldn't you know, certain people made it difficult for everyone to use it. Oh, publicly shame them if they can't afford lunch, refuse to keep schools safe from COVID or guns. For once, I wish their actions would disprove what I've said, that they think kids only matter when they're not born yet.
Okay, so initial reactions to that, Moses.
I can't. That guy and I disagree on so much, and I don't even feel that it would be that fun to get a beer with him.
Okay, so this video went viral on TikTok, I think in the last week. It was also posted on Instagram. I stumbled across it, I think, on Instagram. And I sent it to Moses and said, Moses, we need to talk about this on the podcast. Yes. So what I want to do is I want to walk through each argument he makes, debunk it, discuss the arguments he's making, and then summarize with why his main premise is wrong. His main premise being that kids only matter when they're not born yet. And I have to give it to
conservative pro-lifers.
Right. And I have to give it to him that this song is very catchy. Like, it's definitely...
So it's like Baby Shark in that.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely well done in that it is catchy, and the fact that he even has like article clips above him as he's speaking, that is well done. He backs things up, and so obviously he backs it up with one side, but I have to say that it's well done, even though on the other hand, what this TikTok does is it puts all of the pro-choice talking points together. Moses and I have heard all of these multiple times, puts them all together, and the problem is all of the pro-choice talking points are bad points. There is no good reason to support abortion. They all suck. All of the reasons suck.
If you
this
put
video
all
sucks.
the bad pro-abortion arguments together, do they make one stronger pro-abortion argument? No, they make a lot of still just a trash pile.
Honestly, though, it's just it really is ridiculous. And I thought about how funny it would be if we responded with a TikTok of me singing.
Why not?
Let's go viral.
We don't have a TikTok.
I'm trying to think of what our catchphrase would be, though, because if his is "kids only matter when they're not born yet," I'm trying to think of a good catchphrase, because that is actually, it's a good catchphrase, even though it's besides the point and it actually doesn't work, which we will see. But anyways, let's just jump into it. Let's dive into debunking it. We're going to go line by line here.
Yes.
So first thing he states is some folks believe that life begins when egg meets sperm. Pause there. Actually, no, science tells us that. Yeah. Science tells us that life begins when egg meets sperm. Only ignorant people don't believe this, because a lot of pro-abortion activists actually believe this and agree with this and will say, yeah, that's when life begins, but we still support abortion. And so that's just not true. Some folks believe, most folks actually, everyone who isn't ignorant of the science, and science tells us this is the truth, especially for the side of progressives that says they uphold science.
If you're pro-abortion and you're listening, hi, thank you for listening.
Yes.
Choose life. But also send us an embryology textbook that says that what is created at conception is not a unique human life.
Exactly.
You won't find one.
And you can also explain to us why you say you're pro-science, but then you deny the most basic scientific fact.
Boom.
Just have some fire on the screen.
Yes.
So anyways, that's easy to debunk. So his premise, again, he says this is her second line: kids only matter when they're not born yet, to conservatives. That's his main, or pro-lifers. That's his main argument. Mm-hmm. This statement is very interesting because it literally admits that preborn babies are children. I.e. human beings.
Yeah, what is he calling the thing in the womb?
Kids.
Not a fetus.
Kids.
A kid.
By the way, fetus actually does mean baby in Latin. So for those people that say, oh, it's just a fetus, oh, it's just a baby.
Bringing that classical education to bear.
Woohoo! My years of Latin paid off.
Yeah.
So his argument is that kids don't matter when they're in the womb, according to conservatives. Let's go through and see if that's correct. Because at some point he actually begs us to debunk him. Well, that's what I'm doing.
Yes.
It's exactly challenge accepted. So his next statement is they want to force all women to carry to term. Now, think of the way he's framing the narrative. This is a powerful way to frame the narrative because, that's why even the pro-abortion movement dubbed themselves pro-choice, because it sounds good. It sounds loving. It sounds good.
Who's against choice?
Right, exactly. So don't buy into this false narrative and this rhetoric. Don't forget that a human life is on the line here. It's not about the woman because the baby's body is not the woman's body. And I just want you to imagine this for a minute. Imagine how ridiculous it would sound if someone said the government wants to force all parents to take care of their children. Well, yes, parents should be required by law not to kill their children and to feed their children and clothe their children.
Parents are required by law to do those things.
And they should be.
Yes.
That isn't like, oh, the government wants to force parents to do this thing. I mean, the government requires them to because that's morality. So likewise, it is moral for all women to carry their children to term because a woman's womb should be the safest place for the preborn. And in America, it has become the most dangerous.
So we all understand that parents have responsibility to their children that start when the baby is born. Everyone understands that. We also understand implicitly, our culture, everyone accepts this. No one supports smoking or drinking or doing drugs during pregnancy, right?
And if a pregnant woman is killed and her baby is killed, what is that called?
That is called a double homicide. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yep.
So we all accept basically that the thing that is in the womb is a child. Mm-hmm. So and if your responsibilities for a child exist and they are tied to that child, then they start. Bear with me for a second. Your responsibilities start when that child comes into existence. Mm-hmm. And that child comes into existence at the moment of conception.
Exactly. Moving on to the next claim, he says, kids beg for climate action under crippling debt. So, first of all, kids are begging for climate action. Not all kids, some kids. So, I don't really see how that contributes to its point, honestly. Sure, there are some teen climate change activists. There are also teen activists for the pro-life movement. So you're going to get teen activists on every side. His claim about crippling debt is a problem. I want to be careful with this topic. I know it's touchy. Adults can get into debt when you go to college. That's one of the biggest forms where debt comes from. I would just encourage you, if you are a teen and you're watching this and you're thinking about going to college, don't go to an extremely expensive school that won't give you a good education. Go to Bethlehem College and Seminary or New St. Andrews College, where you can get a very affordable education for very cheap.
Both of us attended private colleges. So Grace is currently a student. Both of us attended colleges where the tuition is significantly lower. Private colleges where the tuition is significantly lower than the average state college tuition. And I just think, like, I don't know. I don't understand. I really don't. And I worked for a company where a lot of my clients were community colleges, and that's a great way to get an education. I mean, like, if you want to pay literally pennies on the dollar and get an education, especially like if you want to do the first 2 years of your major there and then transfer to a college. So like people need to be so much more active about seeking out scholarships and then being realistic about what you can afford.
Exactly. Be wise.
If you're doing a pre-med major, well, you're going to get into that. I don't know a single person...
or pre-law, even.
Or, I don't know a single person who's going into medical school or who is a doctor who doesn't have a lot of debt. That's the way our system is set up. It's not perfect, but people need to not be all starry-eyed about a college education. Don't get a college education if you can't afford to pay off the bills.
Right, and I mean, as a kid, I always wanted to, for the longest time, for years and years, I wanted to be a lawyer or an attorney, and that was something I wanted to do, and I was so interested in it because I've always been interested in public speaking and defending the defenseless, defending the voiceless and the most innocent, which is why I'm passionate about the pro-life movement. But as I got older, I just realized feasibly I didn't want to go into debt, and unless I get a great scholarship to a law school, I'm not going to end up going to law school because it wouldn't set me up well for the future. I would be digging myself out of debt. I wouldn't be able to get married or have kids for a long time, and it wouldn't set me well up for the future. And I can still fight for the things I care about without having that degree. Right. Specifically. So really just be wise about what course you're taking. And this whole argument, I don't really even understand his argument here, because conservatives aren't arguing that kids should go put themselves into debt. Conservatives actually generally are going to put their kids in PSEO, which it depends per state, but PSEO in Minnesota at least enables you to go to college for free while you're still in high school, actually, and get college credits out of the way, even up to two whole years of college credits for free. And so conservatives are far more likely to do that because conservatives are also far more likely to homeschool, and those things kind of usually go hand in hand. So not sure exactly what his point is there. Moving on to his next point, he says, conservatives make sure family leave and child care funding fail. His stats just aren't true on this. The majority of Republicans and Democrats actually support family leave, according to Pew. We'll have that on the screen. Same with child care funding. So that's just debunked. The majority of both support those things. And as we'll talk about at the end, conservatives are much more pro-family overall than liberals, than progressives are. So his next claim is the conservatives take away their parents at the border. Now, this can be hard. Moses and I, neither of us are border experts. We're not claiming to be border experts, but we can bring you the facts. Moses can talk a little bit about this. I'm going to say something really quick. At the border right now, there are adults entering with minors. Now, when that happens, something at the border that's very common is trafficking, and it's very sad. Trafficking is extremely common. So right now, whenever there is a minor with an adult, it would be extremely unsafe if we didn't check the identity of the minor to make sure that it's actually their biological child or guardian, because if it's not, then trafficking is most likely happening. And so that is something that's important. Moses, maybe you can also talk a little bit about why another reason that parents and children might be separated at the border.
Yeah, so when you come across the border illegally, one of two things is going to happen to you. Either you're going to be detained or you're going to be, as they say, catch and release. So you're going to be given a court date with an immigration judge and then led into the community. Now, the Trump administration wanted to take a hard line on immigration, and this goes back to Bill Clinton, and other presidents have done this. taking a hard line in immigration and saying, no, we're not just going to do the catch and release thing because that obviously just encourages more illegal immigration. We're going to detain the migrants. But once you do that, you cannot put kids in the same detention center as adults. The possibilities for abuse are just huge.
Exactly.
And any type of misconduct. So having a separate facility for kids is actually the more humane solution in that scenario. Now, what's happening now or at least earlier in the COVID pandemic, is that everybody, I don't know why they weren't doing this all the time, everybody was just, no tolerance was just being sent back to Mexico or to their country of origin. And what that would cause is for people to send unaccompanied minors across the border. And I just want to say that I understand that people are in desperate situations. But sending and kids have drowned this way, kids have been killed this way. This is not the way. You are not blessing your child. You are failing as a parent if that's what you do. I get the argument that you're trying to get them into the land of opportunity.
Moses, there was this one story last year, so tragic. This dad crossed the river and left his toddler daughter on the shore behind. He crossed. His daughter followed, of course, because her dad's going across and drowned. Isn't that so sad? Tragic. Anyways.
Oh, geez. I can't even handle that type
of
thing.
I know. Sorry. Yeah, he has a toddler, everyone. Yeah, it's so sad. But the point being made is that Republicans conservatives generally do have the best interest of children at heart. And actually, conservatives are very split on border policies. So are Democrats. This is the reason why it's not an excuse. We need border reform. We need immigration reform. Our immigration system is very flawed. But there's a reason that there aren't.
We don't want people to be separated from their families.
Right.
We want people to not cross the border illegally.
Right.
When that happens, decisions need to be made.
Yeah.
We're not here to defend the Trump administration's family separation policy
absolutely
or what the Biden administration is doing now. We probably should do a whole episode about this.
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to echo what Moses said. I'm all for families staying together. The last thing I would ever want is my child taken from me and separated from me. But there are consequences to doing something illegal. We will do another episode on this, but we just debunked that. Next claim, he says contraception reduces abortion, and conservatives want to take that away. Well, there's actually no evidence for this claim that contraception reduces abortion. More than half of abortions occur after a woman was actually using contraceptives, and then women will go ahead and use abortion as an extra contraceptive, actually. So there isn't data to back that. And then his final claim is conservatives refuse to keep kids safe from COVID or guns. So that's just ridiculous. As we know, conservatives are very much for protecting children. Here's the bottom line. Kids are not severely at risk from COVID. They're just not. There's less than a 0.01% chance of a child dying, even if they do catch COVID. And so they're really not at risk for this. And it's ridiculous to act like they are. There was this viral video going around this week or last week, maybe end of last week, about this poor toddler in daycare whose parent was forcing his mask on when he was crying, bawling his eyes out. She kept pulling it back down. He could barely breathe. That is not compassionate. That is not keeping kids safe. Kids don't need to wear masks because they're at a much higher risk of dying in a car accident, but you're still going to drive them to daycare, aren't you? So that is not true. Ultimately, this is his plea throughout the video. He says, I wish conservatives' actions would disprove what I've said. I just disproved what you've said. Our actions do disprove. I'm just going to go a little bit more into this, wrap this up. The bottom line is that these are supposed to be the very best pro-abortion arguments. It turns out there are no good arguments for abortion. It is a myth that pro-lifers are simply pro-birth, and that's the whole thing that he's trying to dig at in this video. I want you to look at our impact. I'm going to give just a few quick examples. Moses and I talk all the time about transitioning, how that hurts children, and that's why we oppose it.
Yes.
Gender transitioning. We talk about how social media hurts children if you're on it too much, because of bullying, depression, lack of attention span, that hurts children. Pornography hurts children. Trafficking, because it's tied to trafficking. So there's so many things that Moses and I talk about almost every podcast that hurt children, and most conservatives are on the same page with us there. And finally, I want to talk to you about New Life Family Services, which is an example here in Minnesota specifically, actually. I just recently toured their facility near St. Paul, near University of Minnesota, and they have different facilities across Minnesota, but they're a great pro-life pregnancy center, and what they do is amazing. They have, so this is all under New Life Services. There's this branch, and then underneath they have their pregnancy centers, which is awesome, and these pregnancy centers support women in so many ways. They not only support women before they have children, but also after they have children, which completely busts the myth that pro-lifers are only pro-birth, and after that, you're on your own. Actually, all of their services are completely free of charge. They offer free STD testing. Actually, they offer free parenting classes for young mothers. They offer free support, free counseling, free clothing, free baby carriers, free maternity clothes, free diapers.
Amazing.
Yes,
what a blessing
I know,
to lower income parents.
Exactly. Free toys. Every single thing they provide is completely free. Free ultrasounds. And so they're going to stand with women after they have children and support them through parenting classes afterwards. And so there's New Life Family Services, and underneath they have their pregnancy centers. They also have New Life Family Adoption, I believe is what it's called, and that's their adoption services, which helps children after they're born. If their parents would like to put them up for adoption, they will help with the adoption process. And then they also have a program called, or a company, I guess, a nonprofit called Conquerors, which is for women suffering from post-abortive trauma. So this just this one example goes to show that the pro-life movement is, number one, about saving babies, but we're about so much more than just that. We're pro-life for all of life. We're going to fight for women who are recovering from trauma from their abortion. We're going to fight for adoption and for putting children with the best family possible. We're also going to fight for the life of the child to take his very first breath. And that's something fundamentally that I want to say. And I've said this before on the podcast, but the pro-abortion movement does not get to define what it means to be pro-life. No. They do not get to, because fundamentally, the very minimum requirement to being pro-life is allowing a child to take his first breath. That is the bare minimum, not doing all of these other things. Other things throughout life are very important, but the chance to take your first breath is a fundamental right guaranteed by our Constitution. That is why abortion is unconstitutional, because every human is endowed with the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And without life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness are meaningless, because you can't achieve either of those things. So don't let the pro-abortion side try to define what it means to be pro-life. Stay strong. Remember that this viral TikTok, had all of the talking points from the pro-abortion side. I just debunked all of them with Moses.
Yeah. And it didn't take us very long either.
It didn't take us very long. I can say more on this, but don't buy into the false narrative. Don't be bought by the euphemisms. Remember that you are on the pro-life side. You're part of the pro-life generation, and life is winning. And if you're pro-abortion and you're watching this, thanks for joining. I hope I changed your mind.
Yeah. There's so many lies out there. I think we've seen this week, Grace. And we've seen people lying about the police. We've seen Senator Tina Smith misleading voters about whether she would support increasing the size of the U.S. Supreme Court through court packing. And we've seen this guy spread a whole host of lies about what pro-lifers want and what actually would be good for people. And it's just so sad to see that. And so, as they say, don't get got. We want to bring you facts like these so that you know what's going on, the real agenda. And that's the point of this podcast. We really appreciate you guys watching and listening. I want to ask one last question. What are you reading this week, Grace?
This week, I'm reading Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan.
Oh, nice.
Great book. It talks about the journey of sanctification as a Christian, and I've read it before, but I'm reading it again actually for school, doing early modern literature, and it's a great book. Definitely recommend if you haven't read it already. It's an important part of your education, so it's a good one. How about you, Moses?
I'm reading The Russian Revolution, 1899 to 1919 by Richard Pipes, which is a super long book. I have it as an audiobook, which is nice. And it's great. The thing that stands out to me so far, really briefly, is just how the Tsarist society in Russia just collapsed by degrees.
Yeah.
And it reminds me just a little bit. There's a lot of differences. It reminds me just a little bit of our society. And there's you could call it like a death of 1,000 cuts. Like small things. I'm not saying that we're necessarily headed for revolution. I certainly hope not.
If you like the podcast, don't forget to share this with your friends and family, either by word of mouth or on social media. You can tag us at MN Family Council if you're sharing on Instagram. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you like this show, it helps us beat the algorithm and just it lets other people know that this is an awesome podcast. For that, this has been The Family Beacon with Grace Evans and Moses Bratchard. Thanks for tuning in today. Every single week, we bring you the top news on life, family, and religious freedom so you can get the facts and stand for truth. We'll catch you next time, guys. Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you're up to date on life, family, and religious freedom. You can follow us on Instagram at MN Family Council and subscribe to us on YouTube to watch our content. Get the facts, stand for truth.